$66 billion. Let's just take a moment to really let that number sink in. It's not just a lot of money, it's a stupid amount of money. It's more than the entire gross domestic product of countries like Luxembourg or Jordan. You could buy every single NFL team, every single NBA team, and still have enough left over to fund NASA for a year. It's a figure so vast, so utterly cartoonish, that it feels less like a real number and more like something a Bond villain would write on a whiteboard while stroking a fluffy white cat. This isn't just a financial crime, it's a statistical anomaly with a dollar sign attached. A number that has the power to destabilize governments, erase fortunes, and rewrite the very rules of the global economy. And it did. And here's the truly terrifying part. This wasn't a slow leak, it wasn't a decade-long scheme of skimming pennies off the top. This was a sudden, catastrophic implosion. One day, the global financial system was chugging along, blissfully unaware, and the next, a $66 billion black hole had opened up, threatening to swallow everything. It was the financial equivalent of the Chicxulub asteroid, and we were all just clueless dinosaurs looking up at the pretty new light in the sky. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how you steal a small country's GDP, you should probably know who I am. My name is Alex Thorne. And no, I'm not some super spy or a grizzled detective with a troubled past. Until a few months ago, I was a forensic accountant. It's a job title that sounds far more exciting than it is. Mostly, it involves staring at spreadsheets until your eyes bleed, drinking lukewarm coffee, and getting disproportionately excited when you find a rounding error. I was the guy companies called when they suspected an employee was expensing their pet's grooming appointments as client entertainment. I was a professional bean counter, a digital bloodhound who sniffed out minor discrepancies. I was, in a word, boring. My life was a comfortable cycle of audits, reports, and quiet evenings. I was good at my job because I love patterns. I see the world in numbers, and when a number is out of place, it screams at me. It's a personality trait that makes me terrible at parties, but excellent at finding where the money went. It all began with an email. It was from a consortium of international banks. A client so far above my pay grade, I assumed it was spam. They were reporting anomalies. Not theft, not fraud, but anomalies. I was flown to a sterile, windowless office in Geneva and presented with a data set so large it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. They told me to find the leak. They didn't tell me I was looking at the largest fraud in human history. They didn't tell me that the last two people who looked at this data had disappeared. One vanished from his locked apartment in Hong Kong. The other's car was found at the bottom of a Swiss lake. Empty. They just gave me a laptop, a secure access key, and a warning. Trust no one. Report only to this number. But as I opened that first encrypted file, I realized I had just stepped off a cliff into a world of shadows, and my old, boring life was gone forever. Before we dive deeper into this digital nightmare, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss how this impossible story unfolds. My first week on the job was a descent into madness. The data was a labyrinth. I was looking at the transaction logs of dozens of the world's largest financial institutions, all woven together. It was a digital representation of the global circulatory system, and somewhere within it, a vampire was feasting. The numbers didn't just fail to add up, they seemed to actively mock the laws of mathematics. Billions of dollars were vanishing, not reappearing anywhere else. They were just gone. It was like watching a magic trick, but the magician was invisible and the rabbit he was pulling out of the hat was the size of a medium-sized economy. The system itself was supposed to be impenetrable. Quantum encrypted networks, multi-layered biometric security AI watchdogs. This wasn't a bank you could rob with a ski mask and a getaway car. This was a digital Fort Knox, and someone had strolled in, emptied the vaults, and walked out without leaving a single footprint. There were no alarms tripped, no security breaches logged. According to the system's own records, nothing had happened. The money had simply decided, of its own free will, to cease to exist. It was the immaculate deception. I started calling the perpetrator the Ghost. This wasn't a normal hacker who smashes through firewalls. This was something else entirely. The Ghost moved through the world's most secure systems like they weren't even there. They didn't break the rules, they rewrote them. They called him Daedalus, not a person really. A legend in the dark web's deepest corners. A master architect of digital mazes. A myth, rumored to have designed the bank's encryption. He hunted on a game preserve of his own design. Daedalus was a ghost story hackers told their children. He was the boogeyman of the digital age. But the code I was looking at had a signature. Too singular, too consistent. The work of one mind. a mind that saw the global financial network as one machine. He turned a single, perfectly placed screw, the apparatus shuddered and began to fall apart. This wasn't about the money. This was about making a statement. The method was diabolical and brilliant. He didn't steal it all at once. He siphoned fractions of a cent from billions of transactions, every day for months. The tiny amounts were routed through an impossibly complex web: shell corporations, cryptocurrency tumblers, offshore accounts, a digital labyrinth, untraceable. By the time anyone noticed, the trail was frozen. He'd laundered it before it was gone. The true horror came when I traced the entry point. The Trojan horse, the elegant code that started it all, wasn't an external attack. It wasn't forced in. It was part of an official, signed, verified software patch, issued by the company that built the bank's security. Daedalus wasn't just a hacker, he was an insider. Or a ghost who'd been an insider, left a key under the mat, waiting to burn it all down. After 2 weeks of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled paranoia, I found the first breadcrumb. It was a single line of code, buried deep within a routine software update that had been pushed out to all the banks months earlier. It was a masterpiece of deception, a digital Trojan horse so elegant and so subtle that no one had noticed it. It introduced a new mathematical rule, a tiny, flawed equation that would only activate under a specific set of circumstances. The ghost hadn't broken into the house, they had built a secret door into the foundation before the house was even finished. But just as I was getting close to understanding the true scope of this digital nightmare, something impossible happened that would change everything we thought we knew about this case. Just as I was getting close, mapping the flow of the stolen funds towards what seemed to be a final destination, something impossible happened. The system, which had been a one-way street of theft, suddenly reversed. A transaction appeared, and it wasn't a small one. It was a deposit of exactly 4,000 Bitcoin, worth roughly $3 billion at the time, sent to a wallet that had been publicly, and controversially, linked to a well-known hacking collective. This wasn't just a strange move, it was insane. It was like a bank robber dropping a bag of cash at a police station on his way out of town. It made no sense. The message attached to the transaction was even stranger. It was a single sentence, broadcast on an open channel for the entire world to see. "This is a finder's fee, the rest is a bug bounty, fix the hole." A bug bounty for a $66 billion theft, the most ludicrous, the most arrogant, the most baffling statement I had ever seen. Daedalus wasn't just confessing, he was taunting, he was framing the largest heist in history not as a crime, but as a security consultation. He was, effectively saying, "Your house is on fire, and here's a bucket of water. By the way, I'm the one who started the fire, you're welcome." The world was now in a full-blown panic, but it was a quiet, terrified panic. The banks and governments couldn't go public with the full story. You can't exactly issue a press release that says, "Our entire financial system is about as secure as a screen door on a submarine, and a digital wizard has his hand on the self-destruct button." That's when people started to go missing. A high-level executive at the security firm vanished on his morning jog in Central Park. No witnesses, no struggle, nothing. A week later, a German cryptographer disappeared from a moving train between Berlin and Munich. It was as if a celestial eraser was scrubbing anyone who got too close to the truth. The message was clear. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a cleanup operation. Daedalus, the untouchable god of code, made a mistake, a stupid mistake. He bounced a signal off a misconfigured server, one I was monitoring with a new tracing algorithm, a flicker, less than a nanosecond. Enough for a partial IP. The IP led to a rundown internet cafe in suburban Tokyo, the last place you'd expect a cyber mastermind. They didn't find a bank of supercomputers, they found a teenager, Kenji Tanaka, 19. He was so engrossed he didn't notice SWAT until they were over him. Daedalus? This kid? It was anticlimactic. During his interrogation, Kenji's story deepened the mystery. "I didn't know anything about the missing $66 billion. I'm just a gamer, I dabbled in security research. I found a weird bug in the banking software. I reported it to what I thought was an anonymous bug bounty. I got 4,000 Bitcoin, which I thought was a legitimate payout." The contradictions were maddening. How could this clueless kid be the meticulous architect who planned this for years? The stupidest hacker, caught using a public Wi-Fi network, also be the weirdest who returned a $3 billion fortune? Authorities thought he was a patsy, a front for the real Daedalus. But Kenji's computer told a different story. He was either the greatest actor the world has ever seen, or the unwitting instrument of a much larger, much more terrifying plan. The arrest of Kenji Tanaka did nothing to solve the crisis. In fact, it made it worse. The public now had a face for the chaos, the face of a bewildered teenager, not a criminal mastermind. The narrative spun out of control. Was he a scapegoat? A prodigy? A pawn? Nobody knew. The uncertainty was poison. Markets that had been teetering on the edge began to truly plummet. The heist was public, and with it came the terrifying realization: the system was a house of cards, built on flawed code and misplaced trust. With the world watching, the consortium of banks was forced into a corner. So they did the only thing they could. They paid. Using central bank funds and emergency measures, they began re-injecting liquidity, a euphemism for printing money to fill the $63 billion hole. But the damage was done. Trust was gone. How could anyone trust a digital transaction again, knowing that the very code underpinning it might be a lie? The world had seen the man behind the curtain, a confused teenager in a Tokyo internet cafe. The incident exposed a fatal flaw. We've built systems so complex no one person can understand them. We placed our faith in algorithms and protocols in digital black boxes, until one day they fail. The $66 billion heist wasn't just theft, it was a philosophical crisis. In the end, nothing was truly resolved. Kenji Tanaka sat in legal limbo, neither convicted nor released, a ghost in a government cell. The markets stabilized but were scarred, forever changed. The money was replaced, but the security hole Daedalus exploited was never confirmed fixed. But I couldn't forget. One question still haunted me, a question the banks, the governments, and the world's media seemed determined to ignore. Before they finally took my laptop away, I found one last thing. A fragment of a log from the brief moment Daedalus's server was exposed. It wasn't a financial transaction. It was a shipping order, a tiny encrypted package dispatched from a holding facility in Geneva. The manifest was vague. One detail stood out: the declared weight, less than 20 grams. What could be worth billions, yet weigh less than a handful of paper clips? It wasn't gold, it wasn't diamonds, it was data, the original sin, the master key. I believe the entire $66 billion heist was a smokescreen for the real prize. Daedalus didn't want the money. He wanted the code, the original unpatched source code for the global financial security protocol, the blueprint for the system. With that code, you wouldn't just steal, you could control it. You could become its god. And so, the greatest heist in history ends not with a bang but with a question. But somewhere out there, a ghost holds a treasure that weighs less than 20 grams. It is the key to the entire global economy. The $66 billion was just a distraction. The real heist is only just beginning.